did that fast. All right. Happy Sunday, everyone. Welcome. This is Mindset Bytes with Miley, your host. Today I have a phenomenal speaker. Her name is Amy Nash. And make sure you guys have a journal, some sort of paper, because you're going to want to take notes. Our topic is about why, discovering, revealing, however you want to phrase it. But Amy is going to give us insight of all of that. But first, let's learn a little bit about Amy. So Amy, tell us, welcome first.
Thank you.
Thank you for taking the time out of your evening or night. It's she is at it's what is it, East Coast time, right?
Yes.
So 10 p.m. over there. So make sure you guys smash some hearts for her. Let her know that we appreciate her time, and make sure you guys do #live that you're joining us. And any questions at any point, put them in the comments. But Amy, so tell us a little bit about yourself. I definitely want to know what your motto for 2021, or if you do New Year's resolutions, that as well. So take it away, Amy.
Awesome. Thank you, Miley, for having me. I'm a wife. I'm a mother to 2 awesome girls. I love to run for t-shirts and causes. Last year, I ran over 100 miles for the Marine Raider Foundation to raise money for their organization. We collectively raised over $112,000. So it was amazing. Yeah, it was amazing. And shout out to Amanda, who is into philanthropy, and she donated some money. This time around, I'm running the Marine Corps Half Marathon in May. And I have the Bataan on Death March ruck in April. So that's about 14 miles that I'm going to ruck.
Wow.
I use those causes and the t-shirts to kind of hold me accountable, as well as to train. Otherwise, I think that it would probably fall off, and I don't know if I'd have those goals, to be honest. I do help people for a living as a therapist by trade. And my goal kind of this year is to be more intentional, whether that's through physical stuff, emotional stuff, health stuff. One of the things that I'm doing is I'm working on my 200-hour yoga teacher training certification, being more mindful of moving my body around, and working on being more consistent with meditation.
Awesome. Is it any specific type of meditation and yoga? Because I know there's like different teachings.
Yeah, absolutely. So the meditation that I kind of focus on, I like a lot of guided imagery and progressive muscle relaxation in particular. But anything with diaphragmatic breathing is really what my go-to is, especially when I need help regulating with COVID and everything that's still going on.
Great. Would that be good? Because we do have a viewer with anxiety. Would that help with anxiety?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. The mind-body connection, actually diaphragmatic breathing maintains homeostasis and will actually regulate, which will help decrease that heart rate. So for anxiety, breathing is an amazing thing to do.
Awesome. So Jennifer, who is live with us, welcome, Jennifer. She asked for a little tidbit, so that's going to be super helpful for her. Do you have like a motto for 2021 other than it's kind of movement, right? Is what I get.
It's just movement and being more intentional. When just my own personal preference, when I create something like a New Year's resolution, I am not always great at sticking to it. And so when I just create kind of a word and kind of base my short and my long-term targets or my goals around that, I find that I'm more successful. But it's different for everybody, right?
Right. All right, so we know a little bit about your background. So tell us about what your story and how you got into the profession, and then we'll lead into discussing the why and why that has kind of evolved in your work.
Sure. Well, I always knew that I was interested in a helping profession, but I actually thought I'd eventually steer towards medicine. But when I took elective classes for fun, I always ran towards psychology, as I was more interested in the mind and behavior just in general. I'm that person that's kind of kooky that will always read about profiling, listening to the podcast, watch those shows. So what I ended up doing was I interviewed clinical providers, and based on the versatility of social work, I jumped into that profession. I obtained my bachelor's, my master's, and then my clinical licensure for that. And through that, I've been able to work acute psych, hospice, and what I do today.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. So walk us of what, like a day of what exactly you do with the client.
Sure. So by trade, I am a therapist. More specifically, I am a licensed clinical social worker. I work with special operations in an embedded position, and I work with some people called operators. Some people will know what that is, some people won't, but they're service members primarily. I also work with some spouses. I do consultation, I do some coaching, but predominantly what my job is I assess, I diagnose, and I treat using evidence-based treatment. I work from everything from prevention to kind of the intervention to everything is on fire, and then also transitioning out of the military as well. And I often see individuals struggle with their why.
Okay, so walk us through that, because that's great. Like, just from the clients you work with, the transition into why. So talk to us about that.
Sure. I'd love to say that I created like the finding my why, but it's been around for far longer than me. But what I can kind of talk to and speak to is why it is so essential to discovering what your why is. I think that, self-determination, you really start with where a client is. And I think that one thing that we've really struggled with at some point in our life is what truly brings us passion and joy, whether that comes in the form of work, whether that comes in the form of hobbies, relationships. Finding your why or your passion, it's not really a new endeavor. It's just something that we as humans constantly strive for. And when we understand our why or our purpose, I kind of think of that as my purpose as well, we'll be more capable of pursuing the things that give us fulfillment. The ACT model in therapy, we kind of talk of a rich and meaningful life. And so things that give us that fulfillment. It can serve as a point of reference for all our actions and decisions from this moment on, kind of allowing us to measure our progress and know when we've met our goals. Most people kind of can't tell you why they do what they do. So when I say why, I don't really make money. That's really the result. By why, it's really what your purpose is, what that cause is, or what that belief is that really fills that passion and that joy for you. When you think about companies or organizations, because sometimes we think of it from that model, it's like, why does your company exist? Why do you get out of bed every morning, right? That's your purpose. That's your cause. That's your belief. And I think that sometimes we confuse kind of the what and the why. And so it kind of just, starting with the why, you go from the clearest thing to kind of the fuzziest thing. We say what we do. We sometimes say how we do it, but we rarely say why we're doing it. And I think that that's what's so important. I think that for those that own a brand or company, and I know that you speak with a lot of entrepreneurs and you do a great job with that, people don't buy what you do. They buy why you do it. And so I think that that's something to think about and a good place to start when it comes to what's your why. Because when people have that drive and that passion, people are really, it's like a beacon of light that people go to, if that makes sense.
Right. You don't necessarily buy from someone because of product, but because you like that person and trust that person.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So we have a real estate agent that is actually really viewing, and like a Jennifer's with healthcare.
Awesome.
So how would you kind of figure out what their why is, or why, how would you steer them to figuring out what their why is?
Sure. I think that there's a lot of different solutions that we can share to help people discover the why. I think you really have to start with sometimes what people's values are and what, if people have no idea what their short or long-term targets are, as we kind of say in the military population, I'd almost start with what are the values that you have? And a lot of times what either in coaching or in therapy, we often look at just a couple of values, whether it be in the domain of health or relationships or work, for example, and you kind of pare it down to just a couple values and start small there and then build upon from there what it looks like. But there are a few different things that we can all do to kind of discover our why, whether it be for business, finding purpose with a job. But really, you mentioned healthcare, you mentioned real estate. Really, one of the first things that I would ask someone is what makes you come alive? When you're working towards things that inspire you, it almost literally makes you feel more alive. And that's kind of why I mentioned, it's when you buy something from someone, it's not necessarily the what, it's the why. If someone is super energetic and has that passion, it's almost, it resonates with that person. And it's like, man, that's intoxicating. I want to learn more because of that person, not so much of the product that someone's holding. Right. So when it makes you feel alive, you have that passion and it kind of just, pours into what you're doing. And it makes it a lot easier to give, especially in this challenging time where we're still dealing with COVID and boundaries and enmeshment. So it's kind of bigger than that, it's just really focusing your attention on the things that kind of put that fire in your belly, and you grow your impact and influence in that way. That's just one thing. So what makes you come alive would be one thing.
Okay.
Also, so you mentioned healthcare, you mentioned real estate. I would also focus on what are your strengths, because we can always teach people skills, but if you have some innate strengths that you already bring to the table, a lot of times there's a passion there already. And so why not just build upon that and grow with it? People have natural talent, kind of those knowledge, skills, and abilities. And so when people are in their element, they're not only more productive as human beings, but they add more value and they enjoy more personal and professional fulfillment. This is a job, where I work, it's not always a 40-hour job. So I have to be in it to win it. I have to really feel that fire in my belly and want to do it, especially when times are tough and I'm getting a lot of feedback from other people. But it is something, I do have the strengths. I am a helping, empathetic person by nature. And it's also something that gives me that fire in my belly, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. Awesome. So are there any, your first thing is, trying to discover your why is to really, what makes you alive, what makes you feel like loss of time doing whatever it is. And then your number two is, really diving deep in what your strengths are, right? So is there any other things that you steps to getting closer to your why that you would share with the audience?
Absolutely. If there's ever been something that you can look back on and it just makes you forget about the passage of time. I think we kind of talked about this earlier before we kind of started, where we said, well, once we start talking, the time is just going to start flying by. So time flies when you're having fun. And psychologists kind of call that a flow. And whatever the case is for you, these activities are kind of where your passions are and where they go. So what I would almost say is, if you look back and see a hobby or something that resonates with you where, man, time just flew by, that might be something to start in a place where you might want to start with where your why is.
Okay.
The other thing that I would I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
The other thing that I was going to talk on is that, what did you like to do when you were a kid? A lot of times I'll ask people that when they don't even know where to start. You can see glimpses of your purpose by remembering those kind of things you did just for the sheer fun of it. I remember, and this is kind of embarrassing to say, but in elementary school, I was a peer mediator. And the reason why is because I got out of class for 1 hour a week and I got to go out and I would mediate between other classmates when they had arguments. But I still remember that I got joy and purpose from that. And so, you know what, looking back on little things that you did as a kid, sometimes they can resonate with your why, with your purpose, with your passion.
Mm-hmm. That's good. A peer mediator.
I was, yes. Who knew that they even had that? But yes, that was a thing.
Yeah. I find so like when talking more on the entrepreneur side, like there's a lot of MLM businesses out there, and I find that a lot of them, join the business, they see kind of the vision of the business, but then they don't have the why, and so they put something generic because everyone wants extra money, or sure. It's for my kids, but like they're not successful because first they're not, like you said, they're not passionate about the product they're selling, and then that's truly not their why. Yeah, everyone wants extra money, but like, does that give you passion? And then for your kids, like they're not labeling, okay, for why, for what is it that you're doing for your kids, right? So how would you, like, I see this all the time because it's not deep enough, it's generic. How would you steer someone up to be like, okay, here's your platform, this is, you're saying money in your kids, but let's dig deeper, because it's essential to, again, going back to, you're not selling the product, but you're selling yourself. You're selling, hey, I want whatever she has, because whatever product she has, that excitement, that beauty, or whatever product is, I want that because of her personality. But so how would you kind of steer someone who is just at
all
ground
over
level?
the place? Yeah.
Right.
I would first start off by normalizing that and say that a lot of us do that. But I would say something really simple. Comparison is the thief of joy. And so what we truly have to do is focus on what is going to give us that passion and purpose. And so we can't compare ourselves to one another, because we really just need to focus on how we compete within ourselves and how we better ourselves. Because there are some people that glamorize a lot of things that I buy it and then I don't drink the Kool-Aid with it, right? Or, someone might not necessarily be passionate about it, but might sell a couple things and then kind of lose interest. So you really have to have that driving factor behind it. It kind of brings up another point, is that before you can do something well, at some point you have to do it without any competence or knowledge about what you're doing. And sometimes you have to be okay with failing and kind of failing forward and using those lessons learned to say, okay, well, this business, what was the good, the bad, and the ugly? Was there something that brought me joy from that? And maybe take a couple takeaways from it. Maybe people liked the opportunity of the flexibility, or maybe they did like parts of the product, or maybe they did like skincare, but maybe it wasn't that specific product, and kind of go back to the drawing board of what were the things, maybe what were the values. Again, start small. I think sometimes we look too much at the big picture and we have to pare it down and start small, if that's fair. It makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Start small. Because I mean, trying to figure out your why it feels like a huge huge obstacle.
It's not a 30-minute conversation to be had. It's a coaching and therapy right now, it is off the hook. I mean, it is a huge industry, and it's because a lot of people are struggling with what their why is, right? And it's not a one size fits all. That would be the other thing I would say. So we can't compare, and it's also just not that one size fits all.
Yeah. So, and then my other question to you would be like, okay, my why necessarily wasn't the same as my why as I was, like in high school or in college. Like, can you talk on a little bit about that? Like, is there any association between, your different your different time frame of your life, or are they all connected, or are they all separate? Like how do you decipher, oh, that was my why then, why isn't that my why? Like for motherhood, for specific, this is I'm like the woman I was before I was had my kids is entirely different. So my why was be successful, make the money, and that climb up the the corporate ladder, and that's going to give me my purpose because I'm going to make money. I'm gonna have all the titles. But now as a mom, I'm like, okay, my why is entirely different. And I feel like a lot of moms who transition to that are just like, okay, so what is my why? And, am I defective because now it doesn't, what I thought it was? And, talk about that. I don't know if that makes sense, but I feel like a lot of people are in that state. Like you talked about.
Absolutely. No, and you're not alone. I think we kind of talked to this before, kind of offline a little bit, is that, when it comes to phases of life and just what our priorities and our values are, they shift sometimes. And for some people, they get really lucky and, maybe they know growing up, this is exactly what my niche is and what I want to do. But more often than not, that's not true. It's kind of like the example. So you brought up parenting. It's kind of the example of you don't have children and you look at someone and you say, well, my kids would never do that, or I would never do that. And then you have children and guess what? You do it, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of that mindset where things will evolve, things will shift. I think that one of the people that you had on spoke to the fact that we only have 100%. And so sometimes we have to look at what our bandwidth is. And so if, family and those values that align with family are the most important, you kind of have to toggle how much of that you want to spend in that environment and how much you can give towards your work and what that looks like. And sometimes that enmeshes too, because it's really challenging to stay at home and have a thriving business. I had a challenging enough time just trying to do virtual telehealth while I was trying to homeschool, right? And I do for the most part, have a separation. But yes, to kind of go all the way back to what your question is, things do deviate, and that is a normative thing. And so, sometimes you kind of have to come to terms with, okay, well, this was what my why was, and let's go back to the drawing board and kind of figure out right now what my why is. That is a normal thing. You are not alone. I would say that's actually more normative. And to be honest, there are times where, I look and I see some shiny object and I'm like, oh, well, is that my why? And I'm like, no, wait. Like, let me get back on target here. Because again, we see a lot of shiny objects in life, or we compare ourselves to one another, or compare ourselves to just things we see in the media. And that is a normal thing. So again, I would start off with keep it simple and just kind of start small and build from there.
Awesome. So let's see, Carissa's joined us, Abby's joined us. Welcome. So we're getting close to the 7:30 mark. If you guys have any questions, feel free to put them in the comments so Amy can give you her insight. But to wrap it all up, if there's anything else that you feel that you need to share about discovering your why. I mean, we talked about, you're really focusing on knowing your core values, knowing why you're doing your why, and what makes you, and the three things that I have down are figuring out what really, makes you come alive, or your strengths, what your strengths are, and really looking back of, what you did as a kid, because that kind of like your peer mediator could be like, foretelling what your passion is or your why is. So anything else that you'd like?
So I talked about growing up, which more often than not, that might not be the case for some people. I'd also ask people to kind of imagine what you would be doing if you learned that you only had a year left to live. Because if you kind of look to, at the end, what were the things that were important to me? Again, it goes back to values and what's important. Right. And if it is important to be that entrepreneur, or to work in real estate, or to do development with children, that's your sign. And again, sometimes you might try it out and you might fail and you might learn from that. But then you kind of know this is important to me and kind of start there.
Do you mind sharing what your why is, Amy?
Sure. My why is definitely helping people. I knew at an early age, like I said, that I kind of wanted to go into that profession of helping people. And it took me a little bit to get where I am today. And my why is definitely, my purpose and passion is helping people in all forms and facets, whether it be, at work or my hobbies. I love to get other people involved with my hobbies too, sometimes selfishly for myself.
So you have a running partner, huh?
I 100% have a running partner, partly because it gets me out of bed, just to be candid. But I also want to share that joy because the endorphins feel so good. And I always have fun with a running buddy. When I volunteer at my child's school, it just gives me that purpose and that passion to connect back to, one, my children, but then also giving back to the community.
Right. That's to talk on your one thing about, how you give back to your kids' school and your community. I read for my daughter's school and I'm like, wow, there must be tons of parents that are signing up. I'm like, okay, let me get on the schedule. And I was the only one. I was like, what? This is like, I'm thinking I'm so grateful. I get to read to the class and, who knows what this is going to inspire. And my daughter was so excited. Oh my God, Mom, you're going to read, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, that for me is my why, because she was so excited. And that's a moment I shared with her that I will never get back. And I wish there was, parents would take the opportunity if they have it to do it. And so that's a little bit of my why, but I just wanted to share that.
Well, that makes a lot of sense because you give back and you help others by coaching as well. So that makes complete sense that you also, it kind of fills your tank to do that with your daughter and also with her classmates as well.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Thanks. All right. If there's no questions, we have 4 minutes left. Feel free to put in the comments. If anything, if you're catching us on the replay, I'll make sure I will answer you back. And if you have any specific questions, I know how to get in contact with Amy. But Amy, is there any social media? I know you do little things on LinkedIn that they could catch you, because I know you have inspiring things to say. So what kind of platform do you utilize for that?
I definitely use LinkedIn. You can find me at Amy Nash. It should say that I'm an embedded licensed clinical social worker, and I keep it short and simple. Normally give a little 1 or 2 minute blurb, and just kind of little tidbits that I think are important to kind of share with other people. So definitely check me out on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Okay, if there's no questions, everyone knows their why, right? But thank you.
I wish in 30 minutes we could figure that out. It took
me,
it took me many years to figure that out.
But I appreciate your time, Amy, and I look forward to seeing your little tidbits on LinkedIn. And I think that's a wrap for us tonight. Thank you, everyone watching. Again, #replay when you catch us on the replay. And if you want to share your why, we would love to hear your why. So have a wonderful night. Remember, a beautiful day always starts with a beautiful mindset. And catch me, not Amy, because Amy has got other things to do. But next Sunday, to sleep. Next Sunday at 7 o'clock. And we will see you then. Thank you, guys.
Awesome. Thank you, Miley.
Night.
Good night.